January 2026. While Beijing reels from an Iranian crisis, a single United States operation in Venezuela turns China's two-decade, $60 billion gamble into ashes overnight. American jets go undetected, oil lifelines are severed, and Chinese military technology is humiliated on the world stage. How did one strike topple Beijing's entire Latin America strategy? And what risks does this now unleash for Washington's rivals? The real shock is in the aftermath. China's financial exposure in Venezuela stands out as one of the most ambitious bets in its global lending portfolio. Over 2,000 Chinese state banks and policy lenders funneled approximately $60 billion into the country. This figure, tracked meticulously by aid data at the College of William and Mary, places Venezuela as the fourth largest recipient of Chinese overseas financing between 2000 and 2023, ahead of most African and Asian partners. The loans funded everything from oilfield expansions and metro lines to sprawling housing projects and industrial zones. In return, Beijing secured oil shipments at discounted prices, with repayment structured through barrels rather than cash. Behind the headline number lies a patchwork of project-level agreements, each tied to Venezuela's vast natural resources. The China Development Bank alone accounted for tens of billions, often through the China-Venezuela Joint Fund. Infrastructure ventures like the Valencia and Maracaibo metro systems, new railways, and assembly plants for Chinese buses and cars became symbols of this partnership. Yet, the core of the relationship remained oil. Nearly every major tranche of lending was collateralized by future crude deliveries, locking China into Venezuela's fortunes as both banker and customer. With the abrupt change in Venezuela's political landscape, these arrangements now hang in the balance. The risk is not just theoretical. Aid Data's global dataset shows no other Latin American country matches Venezuela's level of Chinese debt. The sudden loss of control over this portfolio puts Beijing's entire Latin America strategy under the microscope, exposing the sheer scale of what is at stake for China's global ambitions. Oil for loan deals between China and Venezuela depended on a simple but high-stakes exchange. Beijing provided cash up front, and Venezuela repaid each tranche in shipments of crude rather than dollars. Those agreements reached beyond national balance sheets, tying repayment directly to physical barrels loaded at Venezuelan ports and delivered to Chinese refiners. Contracts often included commodity clauses that required Venezuela to send set volumes of heavy Mary crude every month, regardless of market price swings. Chinese state banks, especially the China Development Bank, insisted on project liens, legal claims over oil output from specific joint ventures like Sinovensa and Petrosinovensa. This structure made every barrel of oil a collateral asset, and it anchored China's financial exposure to Venezuela's daily production and export flows. The sudden seizure of Venezuela's oil infrastructure by U.S. forces throws these arrangements into chaos. With American control over export terminals and shipping lanes, China's right to receive oil as loan repayment is now in jeopardy. Tankers previously earmarked for Chinese refiners are stranded or rerouted, and the legal standing of China's project liens faces a direct challenge from a new governing authority. The risk is not just unpaid loans, it is losing access to the very barrels that underpinned the entire financing model. For Chinese lenders, this means billions in outstanding credit are now backed by collateral they can no longer reach, while global oil markets brace for a supply crunch that will ripple far beyond Venezuela's borders. The oil for loan mechanism, once a pillar of China's Latin America strategy, now looks more like a trap than a shield. Chinese-made radar systems, once promoted as the backbone of Venezuela's air defense, failed to register any trace of the American assault. According to technical specifications, the JY-27 and JYL-1 radars deployed around Caracas and key military bases, should have provided early warning coverage over hundreds of kilometers. Yet, as more than 150 U.S. aircraft crossed Venezuelan airspace, not a single alert was issued. The entire command network remained silent throughout the operation. U.S. helicopters flew at low altitudes, below 100 feet, while drones and electronic warfare units targeted known radar sites, further blinding the system. No intercepts were attempted. No air defense missiles were launched. In the aftermath, military analysts pointed to a total paralysis of Venezuela's air defense grid. The radar's inability to detect or track incoming aircraft was not just a tactical lapse. It represented a direct blow to the credibility of Chinese military exports. For years, Beijing had marketed these systems across Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East as affordable alternatives to Western technology. The events in Caracas now cast doubt on those claims, raising uncomfortable questions for potential buyers worldwide. In arms markets, from Southeast Asia to North Africa, the silence of Venezuela's Chinese-made radar systems did not go unnoticed. The same JY-27 and JY-L1 models sold to Caracas were previously exported to countries such as Pakistan, Myanmar, and Egypt, often marketed as cost-saving alternatives to Western or Russian technology. Now, with Venezuela's airspace breached and the command grid unresponsive, military buyers worldwide are re-evaluating their procurement plans. Defense attachés in capitals from Algiers to Jakarta have begun circulating technical bulletins, comparing the Caracas blackout to similar lapses reported during Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iranian targets, where Chinese and Russian systems also failed to track incoming aircraft. Procurement committees are demanding new guarantees, and some governments have paused pending contracts for Chinese radar or air defense packages. In the Gulf, a senior defense official described the Venezuela incident as a wake-up call, warning that the perceived cost advantage of Chinese systems may come at the price of operational reliability. Even long-standing clients are now seeking independent testing data, fearing that any system vulnerable to electronic warfare or low-altitude penetration could leave their own skies exposed. The credibility of China's entire export portfolio now faces a crisis of confidence as prospective buyers weigh the risks of investing in technology that proved invisible at the moment of truth. Competing visions for America's role in the hemisphere have come sharply into focus. Alexander Gray, a former National Security Council official, describes the current approach as a direct extension of the Monroe Doctrine. He calls it the Trump corollary. This doctrine, first declared in 1823, warned external powers to stay out of the Americas. Gray argues that the latest intervention reasserts this principle, making it clear that attempts by China or any other major power to anchor themselves in the Western Hemisphere will be met with decisive American action. He points to the operation in Venezuela as proof that the United States is willing to use economic, diplomatic, and military tools to block rivals from gaining a foothold, even if it means upending decades of foreign investment. Yet not everyone in Washington sees this as a triumph. Catherine Thompson of the Cato Institute raises a stark warning about the risks of overreach. She argues that announcing American intent to govern Venezuela drifts far from the original Monroe Doctrine and even further from the America First promises that shaped recent policy. Thompson cautions that such open-ended involvement could mire the United States in costly, endless interference, distracting from the core competition with China in Asia. In her view, the doctrine's revival may come at the expense of American restraint and focus, raising the specter of a new era of entanglements, just as the global balance of power shifts elsewhere. Michael Sobolik of the Hudson Institute delivers a verdict that reverberates through every diplomatic channel. China's strategic calculations in Latin America have unraveled in less than a day. Years of patient investment, careful alignment, and risk hedging have been swept aside by a single operation. The abrupt loss of Venezuela as both debtor and oil supplier is not just a financial blow. It exposes Beijing's vulnerability to sudden geopolitical shocks, especially when compounded by simultaneous uncertainty in Iran. Inside the halls of Chinese leadership, the response is silence. No official statement, no protest note, no visible retaliation. Ryan Hass of the Brookings Institution points out that Beijing is unlikely to alter its priorities in the Taiwan Strait, even as it quietly takes stock of American willingness to invoke international law when convenient. Instead, China faces a dilemma. It must either demand the same legal flexibility for itself or absorb the loss and recalibrate elsewhere. For now, the world is left to measure the scale of the collapse. A portfolio once valued at $60 billion, a quarter of China's Latin American lending, now hangs in limbo. Oil tankers reroute, contracts are frozen, and military sales teams field uncomfortable questions. In the space of 24 hours, a cornerstone of Beijing's global strategy has been reduced to a cautionary tale. The question that remains is whether China can recover its footing, or if this is the opening act of a larger unraveling. Tonight, global power isn't just measured in oil barrels or radar screens. It is in the speed with which alliances can unravel. As China recalibrates, every major player now faces a stark new reality. In the Western Hemisphere, the rules have changed. The world is already adjusting.